The pneumatic doors of Mount Sinai Hospital's emergency wing hissed open at 3:47 a.m., admitting a chaos of paramedics, flashing lights, and the metallic tang of blood. On the gurney lay Alexander Crane, tech billionaire and CEO of Crane Industries, his Armani suit torn and stained, his breathing shallow and labored. The Ferrari he'd been driving had wrapped itself around an oak tree on the Pacific Coast Highway, and the first responders had needed 20 minutes to extract him from the wreckage. Male, 33 years old, multiple trauma, possible internal bleeding, the paramedic rattled off to the ER doctor. Blood pressure dropping, he's been in and out of consciousness. What the medical team didn't know was that 3 miles away, in a modest apartment in Santa Monica, a phone was ringing. Maria Santos jolted awake, her heart hammering as she fumbled for her cell phone on the nightstand. The screen showed unknown number, and something in her gut told her to answer. "Is this Maria Santos?" A crisp, professional voice asked. "Yes, who is this?" "This is Mount Sinai Hospital. We have Alexander Crane here. Your number was listed as his emergency contact. There's been an accident." The world tilted. Maria's hand flew to her mouth, and she felt the blood drain from her face. Is he alive?" "He's critical but stable. You should come as soon as possible." Maria hung up and sat frozen for a moment, her mind racing. She'd been Alexander's housekeeper for 5 years, ever since she'd immigrated from Mexico with nothing but determination and her infant daughter. But why would she be his emergency contact? He had a board of directors, lawyers, a personal assistant who managed his every move. Yet somehow, in the privacy of his legal documents, he'd chosen her. A small voice broke through her panic. "Mommy? What's wrong?" 3-year-old Sophia stood in the doorway, her stuffed rabbit dragging on the floor, her dark curls tangled from sleep. Those wide brown eyes, so innocent, so trusting, looked up at her mother with concern that no child so young should have to feel. "Nothing, mi amor," Maria lied, her voice cracking. "Go back to bed." But even as she said it, Maria knew she couldn't leave Sophia alone. Her neighbor, Mrs. Chin, wouldn't appreciate a 4 a.m. knock on her door, and Maria had no family in the States. She made a decision that would change everything. "Actually, sweetie, we need to go somewhere. Let's get you dressed." 20 minutes later, Maria was buckling Sophia into her car seat in their old Toyota Camry, hands shaking so badly she could barely manage the clasp. She'd worked for Alexander Crane for 5 years, and in that time, he'd become more than an employer. He'd become the first person in America who'd seen her as human, not just invisible help. She remembered the day she'd shown up for the interview, 8 months pregnant and desperate. Every other household had taken one look at her belly and shown her the door. But Alexander had sat across from her in his minimalist Malibu mansion, his blue eyes thoughtful, and asked her just one question: "Can you start Monday?" When Sophia was born, he'd sent flowers to the hospital, white roses, her favorites, though she'd never told him. When she'd apologized for bringing the baby to work during her first month back, unable to afford childcare, he'd converted one of his guest rooms into a nursery without a word. And when Sophia took her first steps, it had been in Alexander's living room, and he'd been there to see it, abandoning a conference call to watch her wobble across the marble floor. "Where are we going?" Sophia asked sleepily from the back seat. "To see a friend, baby. A very good friend." The hospital loomed ahead, all glass and steel and harsh fluorescent light. Maria parked in the visitor lot and lifted Sophia into her arms, the little girl's head dropping onto her shoulder. They made it through the main entrance before security stopped them. "Visiting hours start at 8 a.m., the guard said, not unkindly. "I got a call. Alexander Crane. I'm his emergency contact." The guard's expression shifted, and he checked his computer. "6th floor, ICU. But ma'am, no children are allowed in intensive care." Maria's throat tightened. "Please, I have no one to watch her. Just let me see if he's okay, just for a minute." Maybe it was the desperation in her voice, Or maybe the guard had a soft spot for single mothers, but he nodded toward the elevator. 5 minutes. And keep her quiet. The ICU was a hushed world of beeping monitors and antiseptic smells. A nurse directed Maria to room 612, and through the window, she saw him. Alexander lay motionless, his face a canvas of bruises and cuts, tubes snaking from his arms, a ventilator breathing for him. The man who'd commanded boardrooms and negotiated billion-dollar deals looked fragile, breakable. Maria's knees went weak, and she sank into the chair outside his room, Sophia stirring in her arms. "Mommy, is that Mr. Alex?" Sophia whispered, suddenly awake and peering through the window. "Yes, baby." "Why he's sleeping?" "He's hurt, Amor. He needs to rest." Sophia's lower lip trembled. "Can we make him better?" Maria's eyes filled with tears. She didn't know. The nurse had said something about internal bleeding, fractured ribs, a possible traumatic brain injury. The next 24 hours would be critical. Maria sat there as dawn broke over Los Angeles, Sophia curled in her lap, watching the machines breathe life into the man who'd given them both a chance at one. What Maria didn't know was that in that moment, somewhere in the depths of his unconscious mind, Alexander Crane could hear them, could sense their presence. And that small, steadfast vigil would be the thread that pulled him back from the darkness that threatened to claim him. By 9 a.m., the ICU waiting room had transformed into something resembling a corporate war room. Men in expensive suits clustered in corners, speaking in urgent whispers. Women with perfect manicures typed furiously on tablets. This was the inner circle of Crane Industries, and they'd descended on Mount Sinai like vultures circling a wounded animal. Maria had moved to a corner chair, trying to make herself invisible while Sophia colored in a Disney coloring book Mrs. Chun had thankfully dropped off an hour ago. She texted the elderly neighbor in a panic, and the sweet woman had arrived with a bag of activities and snacks, asking no questions. "Who are all these people, Mommy?" Sophia whispered, eyeing the suits with suspicion. "They work with Mr. Alex," Maria answered quietly. She recognized some of them. Gerald Whitmore, the silver-haired CFO who'd never once acknowledged her presence when he visited Alexander's home for meetings. Vanessa Price, the razor-sharp attorney who treated service staff like furniture. And now, striding through the automatic doors with the presence of a woman who owned every room she entered, was Catherine Ashford. Catherine was Alexander's ex-girlfriend, though that term barely captured what she'd been. They'd dated for 2 years, and she'd had wedding magazines on his coffee table and her clothes in his closet. Maria had cleaned around her expensive shoes and pretended not to hear the arguments that echoed through the mansion, Catherine demanding more of his time, his attention, his commitment, and Alexander growing more distant until finally, 6 months ago, he'd ended it. Catherine was 40, stunning in the way that required personal trainers and dermatologists, and came from old money that made Alexander's billions look almost quaint. Her family's name was on hospital wings and museum galleries across California. "I need to see him," Catherine announced to the nurse's station, her voice carrying across the room.
"Now."
"Family only in the ICU, ma'am," the nurse responded professionally. "I am family. We were together for 2 years. I'm the closest thing he has." The nurse glanced at her computer. "I have Maria Santos listed as his emergency contact and medical proxy." Every head in the waiting room turned toward Maria, who felt her face flush hot. She shrank back in her chair, instinctively pulling Sophia closer. Catherine's eyes landed on her like a hawk spotting a mouse. She crossed the room in 4 sharp clicks of her Louboutin heels. "You?" Catherine's voice dripped with disbelief. "You're his emergency contact?" Maria stood, forcing herself to meet Catherine's gaze despite her shaking hands. "Yes, ma'am." "That's absurd. You're his housekeeper." "I'm his friend," Maria said softly but firmly. A cruel smile played at Catherine's lips. "Is that what you're calling it? I suppose it makes sense. You spend all day in his home, probably throwing yourself at him every chance you get. Did you really think putting your name on some paperwork would mean something? Maria's face burned. It's not like that. Mr. Crane and I would never. Save it. Catherine cut her off. I'm getting that changed immediately. Someone needs to make medical decisions for Alexander, and it certainly shouldn't be the help. She spun toward Gerald Whitmore, who'd been watching with uncomfortable interest. Gerald, call our lawyers. Get this straightened out. But before Gerald could respond, a doctor emerged from Alexander's room. Dr. Patel was a small Indian woman with tired eyes and steady hands. She looked around the crowded waiting room with barely concealed frustration. Family for Alexander Crane? That would be me, Catherine said immediately, stepping forward. Dr. Patel checked her clipboard. Are you Maria Santos? I'm Catherine Ashford, Alexander's girlfriend. Ex-girlfriend, Maria corrected quietly, surprising herself with her boldness. Sophia squeezed her hand supportively, though the little girl couldn't possibly understand what was happening. Dr. Patel's expression remained neutral. I need to speak with Miss Santos. The rest of you will have to wait. Catherine's face went red. This is ridiculous. I have been part of Alexander's life for years. She's just an employee. She's his designated medical proxy, Dr. Patel said firmly. Which means legally, she makes decisions about his care. Now, if you'll excuse us. The doctor gestured for Maria to follow her to a private consultation room. Maria hesitated, looking down at Sophia. I'll watch her, a voice said. Maria turned to see Harold Chin, Alexander's elderly driver, who'd apparently joined the crowd. Harold had always been kind to her, one of the few on Alexander's staff who treated her as an equal. Go ahead, Maria. She'll be safe with me. With a grateful nod, Maria followed Dr. Patel, feeling Catherine's furious gaze burning into her back. In the small consultation room, Dr. Patel sat across from Maria and folded her hands on the desk. Mr. Crane's condition is serious, but stable. He has 3 fractured ribs, a collapsed lung which we've reinflated, and significant internal bleeding that we've managed to control. The bigger concern is the traumatic brain injury. He's in a medically induced coma right now to reduce brain swelling. Maria's hand covered her mouth. Will he wake up? We're optimistic, but the next 48 hours are critical. I need to be honest with you, Ms. Santos. There's a chance of permanent neurological damage. We won't know the extent until he regains consciousness. What do I need to do? Dr. Patel's expression softened. Right now? Nothing. We're monitoring him closely. But I need to know, do you understand the responsibility of being his medical proxy? You may need to make very difficult decisions. Maria thought about Alexander teaching Sophia to count using his ridiculously expensive art books. About how he'd learned to make puzzle because Sophia mentioned it was her favorite. About the time he'd found Maria crying over her immigration paperwork and spent an entire weekend helping her sort through it, then connected her with a pro bono lawyer. I understand, she said, and I'll do whatever is best for him. When Maria returned to the waiting room, the atmosphere had shifted. Catherine was on her phone, speaking in sharp, clipped tones. The other executives were gathered in a huddle, and Maria caught fragments of their conversation. Controlling interest? Incapacitated. Board meeting. Harold had Sophia on his lap, showing her pictures of his grandchildren on his phone. The little girl was giggling, temporarily distracted from the grim surroundings. The seizure lasted 90 seconds, though to Maria it felt like hours. She stood frozen outside Alexander's room, Sophia clutching her leg, both of them watching helplessly as the medical team worked with practiced efficiency. Dr. Patel barked orders. Nurses adjusted for lines. Machines beeped their frantic warnings. Finally, mercifully, Alexander's body went still, and the monitors settled into a steadier rhythm. Dr. Patel emerged, stripping off her gloves, her expression grave. She found Maria immediately, as if expecting her to be there despite the earlier orders to leave. Another bleed. the doctor said quietly. "We've got it under control, but we're taking him back to surgery. His brain is swelling more than we'd like." "Is he going to die?" Maria's voice was barely a whisper. "We're doing everything we can." Dr. Patel glanced down at Sophia, who was pressed against her mother's legs, eyes wide with fear. The doctor's expression softened. "You know what? The research shows that coma patients often respond to familiar voices. After the surgery, if he stabilizes, I want you to talk to him. Both of you." "But the hospital policy—" "I'm the head of this ICU," Dr. Patel interrupted. "And I say that little girl can visit for short periods. Sometimes the rules need to bend for the sake of the patient." She walked away before the administrator or Catherine could protest, leaving Maria standing in the hallway with tears streaming down her face and a spark of hope flickering in her chest. The surgery took 4 hours. Maria spent them in the waiting room, fielding increasingly aggressive questions from Catherine and the Crane Industries executives. They wanted to know everything: what Alexander had told her, why he'd made her his medical proxy, whether he'd given her any indication of his wishes for the company. Gerald Whitmore was particularly persistent, his questions couched in friendly concern but clearly fishing for information about Alexander's mental state, his competency, anything they could use. "Had he been acting strangely?" Gerald asked, settling into the chair beside her while Sophia napped fitfully across Maria's lap. "Any unusual behavior before the accident?" Maria thought about the conversation they'd had just 3 nights ago. Alexander had come home late from a board meeting, loosening his tie with evident frustration. He'd found Maria in the kitchen, preparing tomorrow's meals, and instead of heading to his study as usual, he'd sat at the counter and asked if she had a moment to talk. "They want me to take the company public," he'd said. "An IPO that would make me even richer than I already am. But I'd lose control. Lose the ability to make decisions based on what's right instead of what's profitable." "What do you want to do?" Maria had asked, setting down her knife. "I want to matter," he'd said simply. "I want my life to mean something beyond profit margins and stock prices. When I'm gone, I want to have made a difference." It had been a rare moment of vulnerability from a man who usually kept his emotions locked behind walls of charm and competence. Maria had recognized it for what it was, not an employer venting to an employee, but a friend seeking counsel from someone he trusted. Now, looking at Gerald's calculating expression, Maria knew with absolute certainty that she would never share that conversation. These people saw Alexander as a means to an end, a signature on contracts and a figurehead for their ambitions. They didn't know him. Not really. "He seemed fine," Maria told Gerald. "Happy, even." Gerald's eyes narrowed slightly, sensing the wall she'd erected, but he simply nodded and retreated to his corner to make phone calls. Catherine, meanwhile, had stationed herself near the nurse's station like a sentry, stopping anyone who tried to enter Alexander's room. She'd changed into a simple black dress that probably cost more than Maria's monthly rent, playing the part of the grieving almost widow to perfection. When a nurse emerged with an update, Catherine was there immediately, hands clasped in theatrical concern. "How is he? Please tell me he's going to be okay." The nurse, looking uncomfortable, repeated what she'd apparently been told to say. "I can only discuss the patient's condition with Miss Santos." Catherine's mask slipped for just a moment, fury flashing across her face before she smoothed it away. "Of course. I understand. Medical privacy and all that." But her eyes, when they landed on Maria, promised retribution. By the time Dr. Patel emerged from surgery at 6 p.m., Maria had been at the hospital for 14 hours. Sophia was cranky and hungry despite the crackers and juice Harold had kindly provided. Maria herself hadn't eaten since the night before, running on nothing but coffee and fear. "The surgery went well," Dr. Patel announced. "We've relieved the pressure on his brain. He's back in his room, still in a medically induced coma, but his vitals are stronger. I'm cautiously optimistic." Maria felt her knees buckle with relief. Harold caught her elbow, steadying her. Can I see him?
Yes.
And I meant what I said earlier. Talk to him. Both of you. Dr. Patel smiled at Sophia, who'd perked up at the mention of visiting Alexander. Sometimes love is the best medicine we have. The word hung in the air, love. Maria didn't correct her. How could she explain the complicated truth? That she loved Alexander, but not in any simple way, that he'd become her dearest friend, her daughter's honorary uncle, the unexpected blessing in a life that had held so much hardship? That sometimes, late at night when the mansion was quiet, she let herself imagine a different life, where a man like him could look at a woman like her and see a partner instead of an employee? But those were fantasies, nothing more. Ready to see Mr. Alex? She asked Sophia, who nodded enthusiastically. They walked past Catherine, who started to object but was cut off by Dr. Patel's firm. They're his designated visitors. Alexander's room was quieter now, the emergency having passed. He lay motionless, his head wrapped in bandages, his face peaceful despite the trauma it had endured. Sophia gasped when she saw him, her small hand finding her mother's. Is he sleeping, Mommy? Yes, baby. A very deep sleep. Maria pulled a chair close to the bed, lifting Sophia onto her lap. For a long moment, they just sat there, watching the gentle rise and fall of his chest, listening to the steady beep of the heart monitor. Then Sophia reached out and put her tiny hand on Alexander's much larger one. Mr. Alex? It's Sophia. You gotta wake up now. We miss you. Nothing. No response. But Maria could have sworn she saw his fingers twitch slightly. Tell him about your day, Amor. Maria encouraged softly. And Sophia did. She talked about Mrs. Chen's cat, about the picture she'd drawn for him at preschool, about how she'd learned to spell her name. She talked the way only a 3-year-old can, jumping from topic to topic with no regard for logical transitions, her voice filling the sterile room with warmth and life. Maria watched Alexander's face for any sign of awareness, any indication that he could hear them. Medical science said that coma patients might be aware of their surroundings, might hold onto voices like lifelines in the darkness. She had to believe that was true. My turn, Maria said when Sophia finally wound down. She kept her voice low, intimate, speaking to him the way she might if they were alone in his kitchen at midnight, sharing coffee and conversation as they'd done so many times before. You scared me, Alex, she said, using his first name for perhaps the first time without the respectful Mr. preceding it. When I got that call, I thought I'd lost you. And I realized that somewhere along the way, you became essential. Not just to my life, but to who I am. You taught me that I deserve respect, that my voice matters, that my dreams aren't foolish just because I clean houses for a living. She paused, blinking back tears. You taught Sophia that men can be kind. That's not a small thing, Alex. Her father, he was not a good man. He hurt me, and when I told him I was pregnant, he told me to get rid of it or get out. I chose to get out. I chose Sophia. But I was so afraid that she'd grow up never knowing what a good man looks like. And then we met you. The monitors beeped steadily, unchanging. Alexander's face remained peaceful, unreactive. Sophia thinks you hung the moon, Maria continued, her voice thick. Every morning when we arrive at your house, the first thing she asks is whether you're home. She saves her best drawings for you. She practices reading so she can read you stories instead of the other way around. And when you picked her up and put her on your shoulders to reach the cookie jar, even though I told you not to give her cookies before dinner, she told me it was the best day of her whole life. A nurse entered to check Alexander's vitals, smiling kindly at Maria and Sophia before making her notes and departing. They were alone again with the quiet machines and the weight of uncertainty. We need you to come back, Maria whispered. Please, Alex. Fight your way back to us. Sophia, growing tired, curled against her mother's chest, her little hand still resting on Alexander's. I love you, Mr. Alex, she mumbled sleepily. You're my favorite. And this time, Maria was certain of it. Alexander's fingers definitely twitched, curling slightly as if trying to hold onto the small hand touching his. It was the barest movement, perhaps nothing more than an involuntary muscle spasm, but Maria chose to believe it meant something more. She chose to believe he could hear them. She chose to believe he was fighting to come back. The hospital became Maria's entire world for the next 3 days. She'd arranged with Mrs. Chen to stay at her apartment to keep it occupied, and Harold had quietly informed her that he'd handle getting some of her and Sophia's things. The ICU waiting room became their temporary home, with Sophia napping on the vinyl chairs and Maria subsisting on vending machine food and the occasional sandwich someone would bring her. Alexander's condition remained unchanged, stable but unconscious. Dr. Patel had begun reducing the sedation, hoping he might wake naturally, but so far there'd been no response beyond those small finger movements that Maria clung to like a lifeline. What had changed was the atmosphere at the hospital. Crane Industries had effectively set up a satellite office in the waiting room. Lawyers came and went, carrying briefcases and speaking in hushed tones. Gerald Whitmore had become a permanent fixture, his laptop always open, his phone always pressed to his ear. And Catherine had transformed herself into the grieving girlfriend with impressive commitment, dabbing at her eyes whenever doctors appeared, speaking to reporters who'd started gathering outside about her beloved Alexander. Because of course the media had gotten wind of the story. Tech billionaire in critical condition after mysterious late-night car crash. It was too good not to cover. Camera crews camped outside the hospital, and Maria had learned to use the back entrance to avoid them. On the 4th morning, Maria was reading The Very Hungry Caterpillar to Sophia in the waiting room when Gerald approached, another man in an expensive suit beside him. "Maria, do you have a moment?" Gerald's smile was warm, but his eyes were cold. "This is Richard Blackwell, one of our corporate attorneys." Maria set down the book, instinctively pulling Sophia closer. "What is this about?" "We need to discuss Alexander's medical care," Richard said smoothly, sitting without invitation in the chair across from her. "Specifically, the question of his medical proxy designation." Dr. Patel said it was legal. "Oh, it's legal," Richard agreed. "But we've uncovered some concerning information. Did you know that Alexander updated his emergency contact information and medical directives just 2 weeks ago? Previously, his parents were listed, though they're both deceased now, and before that, Ms. Ashford." Maria's stomach tightened. She hadn't known that. Alexander had never mentioned changing anything. "The timing is suspicious," Gerald added, his voice gentle, but his words sharp. 2 weeks before a serious accident, he suddenly designates his housekeeper as his medical proxy? "I'm sure you can understand our concern." "What are you suggesting?" Richard leaned forward. "We're not suggesting anything. We're simply ensuring that Alexander's interests are protected. To that end, we'd like you to sign over medical proxy to the board of directors. You be compensated, of course, handsomely. Shall we say $100,000 for your time and trouble?" The number hit Maria like a slap. $100,000. More money than she'd ever seen in her life. Enough to pay off her student loans from the nursing degree she'd never finished, to move into a better apartment, to put away money for Sophia's education. Enough to change their lives. And all she had to do was walk away. "No," Maria said firmly. Gerald's eyebrows rose. "No? Maria, be reasonable. You're a housekeeper. You're not equipped to make complex medical decisions. If Alexander needs surgery, needs experimental treatment, these are matters that require expertise. Dr. Patel will advise me on the medical aspects. I'll make decisions based on what Alex would want." "And how exactly do you know what Alexander would want?" Catherine's voice cut across the conversation. She'd appeared from wherever she'd been holding court, her expression icy. "You clean his house. You cook his meals. That doesn't mean you know his mind." Maria met her gaze steadily. "I know him better than you think." "Really?" Catherine's smile was cruel. Did he tell you about his father? About the fact that Martin Crane spent his last 3 years in a vegetative state, kept alive by machines because the doctors said there was a chance, always a chance, that he might wake up? Did Alexander tell you how he watched his mother bankrupt herself paying for care, how he had to pull the plug himself in the end because she couldn't bear to do it? The words hit Maria like physical blows. No, Alexander had never told her that. He'd mentioned his parents had died, but never the details, never the pain. That's what you're risking, Catherine continued. Keeping him alive past the point of any meaningful recovery, because you can't let go. Because you've developed some inappropriate attachment to your employer. That's not fair, Maria said, her voice shaking. I'm trying to honor his wishes. You don't know his wishes. Catherine's composure cracked, real emotion bleeding through. I was with him for 2 years. I know that he's terrified of ending up like his father. I know that he'd rather die than live as a shell. And I know that if he understood the risk he was taking by putting his life in the hands of someone completely unqualified, he'd be horrified. Maybe that's why he didn't choose you. Maria shot back, surprising herself with her boldness. Maybe he knew you'd give up on him too easily. The waiting room went silent. Catherine's face went white, then red. How dare you? Enough. Dr. Patel's voice cut through the tension. She stood in the doorway, her expression thunderous. All of you out. This is a hospital, not a boardroom. You're disturbing other patients and their families. She pointed at Catherine and the lawyers. You 3. I want you out of this waiting room. You can stay in the hospital, but not on this floor. You can't, Catherine started. I absolutely can. This is my ICU, and I won't have you harassing my patient's medical proxy. Security can escort you out if necessary. Gerald made a subtle gesture, and he and Richard stood. This isn't over, Gerald said quietly to Maria. We're filing a petition with the court to have you removed as medical proxy. A judge will decide if you're truly acting in Alexander's best interests. They left, Catherine throwing one last venomous look over her shoulder. When they were gone, Dr. Patel sat down beside Maria, her anger evaporating into concern. Are you okay? Maria realized she was shaking. Sophia, sensing her mother's distress, climbed into her lap and hugged her tightly. I don't know if I can do this, Maria admitted. What if they're right? What if I'm not qualified to make these decisions? Let me tell you what I see, Dr. Patel said. I see a woman who has been here every day, reading to a man who can't respond, talking to him, playing him music on her phone. I see someone who asks questions about his care, who wants to understand every test, every medication. I see a mother raising a kind, loving child who clearly adores Alexander Crane. And I see someone who cares more about his well-being than his bank account. She paused. That makes you more qualified than you realize. But what Catherine said about his father, is she right? Would he want me to let him go, if there's no hope? That's a question only you and Alexander can answer. But Maria, we're not there yet. His brain activity is good. His body is healing. There's every reason to believe he'll wake up. We just need to give him time. Maria nodded, not trusting herself to speak. There is something else, Dr. Patel continued gently. I'm required to report this court petition to the hospital administration. They may restrict your access until it's resolved. No. The word came from Maria's lips as a whisper of pure fear. Please don't keep me from him. But even as she said it, she saw the sympathy in Dr. Patel's eyes and knew the doctor's hands were tied by hospital policy and legal liability. The board of Crane Industries had resources Maria couldn't dream of matching. They'd bury her in legal fees, paint her as an opportunist who'd manipulated a vulnerable man, destroy her reputation. Maybe she should just sign the papers and walk away. Take the money and disappear. It would be easier. Safer. But then she thought about Alexander's face when he'd first met Sophia, how he'd crouched down to her level and asked her name with genuine interest. She thought about the time he'd found her crying in the laundry room because it was the anniversary of her mother's death, and he'd sat with her for 2 hours, not saying much, just being present in her grief. She thought about last Christmas, when he'd given Sophia not expensive toys but something more precious, his time, spending the whole day teaching her to build a gingerbread house while Maria cooked dinner. These people didn't know him. They saw his money, his power, his usefulness to their ambitions. But Maria knew his heart. And she wasn't going to abandon him now, no matter the cost. "I'm not signing anything," she told Dr. Patel. "I'm staying. They'll have to drag me out." The doctor smiled slightly. "I was hoping you'd say that. Now, why don't you take Sophia to see him? Visiting hours are almost over, and I have a feeling he needs to hear her voice." Maria gathered her daughter and their belongings, heading toward room 612 with renewed determination. But as they approached, she heard raised voices inside and froze. Through the window, she could see 2 security guards, and they were disconnecting Alexander's monitors. "What are you doing?" Maria burst through the door, Sophia on her hip, her voice sharp with panic. "Stop." The older of the 2 security guards looked up, his expression apologetic but firm. "Ma'am, we have orders from hospital administration. Mr. Crane is being transferred to a private facility." "What? Who authorized that?" "The board of directors of Crane Industries." Catherine's voice came from the doorway. She stepped into the room, followed by Gerald and Richard Blackwell, her expression triumphant. "Given the questionable circumstances surrounding your designation as medical proxy and pending the court's review, we've made arrangements for Alexander to receive care at Cedars-Sinai. They have an excellent neurology department. You can't just move him." Maria's arms tightened around Sophia protectively. Dr. Patel said. "Dr. Patel isn't his medical proxy anymore." Catherine held up a document. "We filed an emergency petition this morning citing the suspicious timing of Alexander's medical directive changes, your clear conflict of interest as an employee who stands to benefit from his incapacity, and the need for immediate intervention to prevent potential harm. A judge granted a temporary restraining order an hour ago." The words hit Maria like a physical blow. She looked at the paper Catherine was holding, the legal jargon swimming before her eyes. "Temporary restraining order, suspended authority, pending full hearing." "This is wrong," Maria said, her voice breaking. "Alex chose me because he trusts me. You can't just erase that." "We're not erasing anything," Gerald said smoothly. "We're ensuring that Alexander receives the best possible care while the courts determine the validity of his medical directives. Surely you want what's best for him." "Don't you dare," Maria shot back, her grief turning to anger. "Don't you dare pretend this is about his well-being. This is about control. About making sure you maintain access to his company, his money." "That's a serious accusation," Richard Blackwell said coldly. "One you might want to reconsider before making publicly. Defamation can be very expensive." Sophia had been silent throughout this exchange, watching the adults with wide, frightened eyes. But now, as the security guards began to prepare Alexander for transfer, moving his 4 stands and checking the portable monitors, she seemed to understand that they were taking her Mr. Alex away. "No." Sophia squirmed out of her mother's arms and ran to Alexander's bedside, throwing her small body across his chest. "You can't take him. He's ours." "Sweetheart, we need to move Mr. Crane," one of the guards said gently, reaching for her. "Don't touch her," Maria warned, moving to her daughter's side. Catherine sighed dramatically. "This is exactly why a child shouldn't be in a hospital ICU. She's traumatized. You're traumatizing her, Maria, by dragging her through this situation. The only trauma here is you trying to steal her Mr. Alex away," Maria retorted. She tried to pick up Sophia, but her daughter clung to Alexander's arm with surprising strength. "He needs us, Mommy," Sophia sobbed. "Tell them he needs us." Maria felt her heart shattering. How could she explain to a 3-year-old that sometimes the world wasn't fair, that people with money and power could take away the people you loved, that all the love in the world couldn't protect you from loss. Sophia, baby, we have to let them. No. Sophia's cry was anguished. Mr. Alex, wake up. Please wake up. Tell them you want to stay with us. The monitors continued their steady beeping. Alexander's face remained peaceful, undisturbed by the chaos surrounding him. The security guards exchanged uncomfortable looks. Ma'am, we really need to proceed, one of them said to Catherine. Then proceed, Catherine said coldly. Remove the child if necessary. That's when Dr. Patel appeared in the doorway, her face flushed with anger. What the hell is going on in my ICU? We're transferring the patient, Catherine said smoothly. We have a court order. Dr. Patel strode to Catherine and snatched the document from her hands, scanning it rapidly. Maria watched the doctor's jaw tighten as she read. This says pending a full hearing, Dr. Patel said. It suspends Ms. Santos's authority, but it doesn't grant authority to you. It appoints the court as temporary guardian, which means any major decisions need judicial approval. Moving him to another facility qualifies as a major decision. Catherine's smile faltered slightly. We have consent from the temporary guardian. Do you? Let me call the judge's chambers and verify that. Because if you're moving a patient without proper authorization, that's kidnapping. And I will call the police. The room went silent. Gerald and Richard exchanged glances. Catherine's mask of control showed its first real cracks. This is ridiculous, Catherine said. We're trying to help him. No, you're trying to control him, Dr. Patel shot back. There's a difference. Now get out of my patient's room before I have you removed from the hospital entirely. You're making a mistake, doctor, Gerald said quietly. Crane Industries is one of this hospital's largest benefactors. It would be unfortunate if that relationship were to suffer because of this situation. Dr. Patel's eyes flashed. Are you threatening me? Because I should tell you, I don't respond well to threats. And I care a lot more about my patients' well-being than your donations. Now get out. The security guards, sensing the shifting power dynamics, had already stepped back from Alexander's bed. Catherine looked ready to argue further, but Richard put a hand on her arm. We'll pursue this through proper channels, he said. But doctor, you should know, we will be filing a formal complaint about your handling of this case. Your bias toward Ms. Santos is clear and unprofessional. File whatever you want, Dr. Patel said. My patient stays here, in my care, until a judge tells me otherwise in writing. They left, though Catherine paused at the door to deliver one final shot. Enjoy this victory, Maria. It won't last. We have resources you can't imagine. You'll be buried in legal fees before the week is out. And when Alexander wakes up, if he wakes up, he'll be horrified that you dragged his name through this circus. When they were gone, the room seemed to deflate. Maria sank into the chair beside Alexander's bed, emotionally exhausted. Sophia was still draped across Alexander, her tears soaking into his hospital gown, her small body shaking with sobs. I'm so sorry, Maria said to Dr. Patel. I've brought all this trouble to you, to the hospital. Stop, Dr. Patel said firmly. She sat on the edge of Alexander's bed, her professional demeanor softening. You didn't bring this trouble. They did. And between you and me, I've seen a lot of families fight over incapacitated loved ones, and it's almost never about the patient. It's about money, about control, about ego. But you? You're here because you care about him. That's rare. She checked Alexander's monitors, making small adjustments. His vitals actually improve when you and Sophia are here. Did you know that? His heart rate stabilizes, his blood pressure normalizes. The human body responds to love, Maria. It's not something we can measure scientifically, but I've seen it too many times to deny it. What do I do now? Maria asked helplessly. I can't afford lawyers. I can't fight them. Maybe you won't have to. Dr. Patel smiled slightly. I have a friend who specializes in medical proxy cases. Pro bono work for people who can't afford representation. Let me make a call. She left, and Maria was alone with Sophia and Alexander once more. She gently pried her daughter's fingers from Alexander's arm and lifted her into her lap, rocking her slowly. "I'm scared, Mommy," Sophia whispered. "Me too, baby. Me too. What if they take Mr. Alex away?" "Then we'll fight to bring him back," Maria said, surprised by the steel in her own voice. "Because that's what you do for people you love. You fight." Sophia nodded against her chest, her tears finally slowing. They sat there in silence for a while, the only sounds the beeping monitors and the distant murmur of the hospital beyond the room. Then Maria began to sing. It was a song her own mother had sung to her, a Mexican lullaby about the moon watching over children while they sleep. Her voice was soft and slightly off-key, but it filled the room with warmth. Sophia joined in on the parts she knew, her small voice blending with her mother's. And that's when it happened. The fingers of Alexander's right hand, the one Sophia had been holding earlier, twitched. Not the small, involuntary movements Maria had seen before, but a deliberate flexing, as if reaching for something. Maria's breath caught. "Alex." His eyelids fluttered. Once, twice, then slowly, agonizingly slowly, they opened. Alexander Crane's eyes were unfocused at first, confused, trying to make sense of the harsh hospital lights and the unfamiliar ceiling. His mouth moved, but no sound came out, his throat too dry from days of intubation. "Don't try to talk," Maria said urgently, pressing the call button for the nurse. "You're in the hospital. You were in an accident. You're okay now. You're going to be okay." His eyes found hers, and in them she saw recognition. Confusion, yes. Pain, certainly. But also recognition. He knew her. Then his gaze shifted to Sophia, who had gone completely still in her mother's lap, staring at Alexander with wonder. "Mr. Alex?" Sophia whispered. "You're awake." Alexander's lips curved into the barest smile. His hand moved again, reaching towards Sophia, and the little girl immediately took it in both of hers. "I knew you'd wake up," Sophia said, tears streaming down her face now, but happy tears this time. "I told them you would. I told them you needed us." The room suddenly filled with people, Dr. Patel, nurses, medical residents. They swarmed around Alexander, checking his pupils, his reflexes, asking him questions. Maria pulled Sophia back to give them room, but Alexander's eyes tracked them, and his hand remained extended towards Sophia until she was too far away to reach. "Mr. Crane, can you tell me your name?" Dr. Patel asked. Alexander's voice, when it came, was a raw whisper. "Alexander. Alexander Crane. Do you know where you are?" "Hospital." His eyes moved around the room, taking in the medical equipment, the bandages on his arms. "Accident." "Yes, a car accident. You've been unconscious for 4 days. Do you remember what happened?" His brow furrowed with concentration. "Driving. Late. Someone," he stopped, confused. "Can't remember." "That's normal," Dr. Patel assured him. "Memory of the accident itself often doesn't come back." "What's the last thing you do remember?" Alexander's eyes found Maria again. "Dinner." Maria made pozole. Sophia helped. His gaze shifted to the little girl. "You got it all over yourself." Sophia giggled through her tears, and Maria felt her own tears start to flow. "That was 5 nights ago," Dr. Patel said, making notes. "Excellent. Your memory seems intact except for the immediate period around the accident." "That's very good, Mr. Crane." "Thirsty," Alexander rasped. A nurse brought water with a straw, helping him take small sips. As his throat eased, Alexander's eyes moved around the room again, this time with more awareness. "Why?" he started, then stopped to gather strength. "Why are you crying, Maria?" "Because we thought we'd lost you," Maria said honestly. "Because you scared us half to death. Because I'm so happy you're awake." Alexander's expression softened. His hand reached out again, and this time Maria understood. She moved closer, bringing Sophia with her, and took his hand. It was weak, his grip barely there, but it was real and warm and alive. "Tried to tell you," he whispered. "Seatbelt. Always wear your seatbelt." Despite everything, Maria laughed. "You're absolutely right. I'll never let Sophia ride without one again." "Good." His eyes started to drift closed, exhaustion claiming him. "Stay." "We're not going anywhere," Maria promised. But even as she said it, the door opened again, and this time it was Catherine, Gerald, and their lawyers. They must have been alerted by someone that Alexander was awake. Catherine's face was a mixture of relief and calculation. "Alexander." Catherine rushed to his bedside, pushing past Maria. "Oh, thank God. We've been so worried." Alexander's eyes opened again, focusing on Catherine with evident confusion. "Catherine? What are you doing here?" "I came as soon as I heard about the accident," Catherine said, taking his other hand. "I've been here every day, fighting to make sure you got the best care." Alexander's brow furrowed. He looked at Maria, then back at Catherine, clearly trying to process. "We broke up 6 months ago." Catherine's smile didn't waver. "I know, darling. But that doesn't mean I stopped caring about you. When you need me, I'll always be here." Gerald stepped forward. "Alexander, it's good to see you awake. We need to discuss some urgent matters regarding the company." "Mr. Crane needs rest," Dr. Patel interrupted firmly. "Whatever business you have can wait." "With respect, Doctor, Crane Industries has been without its CEO for 4 days," Richard Blackwell said. "There are time-sensitive decisions that need to be made. Since Mr. Crane is now conscious, he can address the question of his medical proxy and—" "Out," Dr. Patel said. "All of you. My patient needs to recover, not deal with corporate politics." "It's fine," Alexander said weakly. He looked at Gerald. "What's happened with the company?" "Nothing that can't wait," Maria said firmly, surprising herself. She met Gerald's eyes with newfound courage. "Dr. Patel is right. You need to heal first." "Maria," Gerald started. "Is my medical proxy," Alexander finished, his voice gaining strength. "She speaks for me. If she says it can wait, it can wait." Catherine's face paled. "Alexander, you should know, there's been a legal challenge to that designation. We were concerned about the timing, about whether you were in the right frame of mind when I chose the person I trust most in the world to make medical decisions for me." Alexander's eyes, though tired, were clear and sharp. "I was perfectly sound. Maria is my medical proxy because I want her to be. Is that clear enough?" The room went silent. Gerald's jaw tightened. Catherine looked like she'd been slapped. Richard Blackwell simply made notes on his tablet, already calculating next moves. "We'll discuss this when you're stronger," Catherine said finally, her voice tight. "There's nothing to discuss," Alexander said. Then, to Dr. Patel, "Is there paperwork I need to sign?" "To confirm Maria's authority." "I can have something drawn up," Dr. Patel said, barely suppressing a smile. "Do it. And I want a statement released to the media. Maria Santos has my complete confidence and authority to make any medical decisions on my behalf. Anyone interfering with that will be removed from this hospital." Sophia, who'd been quiet through this exchange, suddenly spoke up. "Mr. Alex? Are you mad?" Alexander's expression immediately softened. He looked down at the little girl who still held his hand. "No, sweetie. I'm not mad. Just tired." "The mean lady said we were traumatizing," Sophia said seriously, her pronunciation of the big word slightly off. "She said we were bad for being here." "You could never be bad," Alexander said gently. "And you're not traumatizing. You're exactly what I needed. Both of you." He looked up at Maria, and in his eyes she saw something that made her breath catch. Not just gratitude, but something deeper. Something that looked almost like love. "I heard you," he said softly, in the darkness. "I heard you reading to me. Heard Sophia talking about her drawings. Heard you singing." It was the only thing keeping me tethered. The only reason I fought to come back. Maria's tears flowed freely now. We needed you to come back. Needed to come back, Alexander echoed. To you. To Sophia. To... He paused, struggling for words. To my family. The word hung in the air, impossibly precious. Sophia gasped with delight. We're your family, Mr. Alex? If you'll have me, Alexander said, managing a real smile now despite his exhaustion. Yes. Sophia threw her arms around his neck, gentle despite her enthusiasm. Yes, yes, yes. Catherine made a disgusted sound and turned to leave, Gerald and Richard following. But at the door, Catherine paused and looked back. You'll regret this, Alexander, she said quietly. When you're thinking clearly again, you'll see what a mistake you're making. The only mistake I made was wasting 2 years with someone who can't understand that family isn't about money or status, Alexander said. It's about showing up. About being there even when it's hard, even when there's nothing to gain. Maria and Sophia taught me that. Catherine left without another word, and the door swung shut behind her. In the quiet that followed, Dr. Patel checked Alexander's monitors one more time. Your vitals look excellent, Mr. Crane. Better than they have since you arrived. I'd say you're on the road to a full recovery. Thanks to them, Alexander said, squeezing Maria's hand weakly. Thanks to all of you, Dr. Patel corrected. Now, I'm going to have to ask Maria and Sophia to let you rest. But they can come back in a few hours. Actually, Alexander said, is there any medical reason they can't stay? I sleep better with them here. Dr. Patel considered. Against hospital policy. But then again, I seem to be developing a habit of bending policy when it comes to you three. I'll have a cot brought in for Sophia, and Maria can use the recliner. But at the first sign that it's interfering with your recovery, they're out. Deal? Deal, Alexander agreed. As Dr. Patel left, Maria settled Sophia on the cot that a nurse brought in, covering her with a thin hospital blanket. The little girl was asleep almost instantly, exhausted from the emotional roller coaster of the day. Maria returned to Alexander's bedside, meaning to sit in the chair, but he patted the edge of the bed. Stay close, he said. Please. So Maria perched carefully on the edge of his bed, and Alexander's hand found hers again. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to Sophia's soft breathing and the steady rhythm of the monitors. I meant what I said. Alexander finally spoke, his voice drowsy. About family. I know it's complicated. I'm your employer, and there are power dynamics and 1,000 reasons why this is probably inappropriate. But somewhere along the way, you and Sophia became the most important people in my life. Alex. Let me finish, he said gently. I don't know what this means yet. What it could mean. Maybe nothing changes. Maybe you just stay my housekeeper and my friend, and that's enough. But I needed you to know that when I was in the darkness, when I was trying to find my way back, it was your voice I followed. It was the thought of Sophia's smile that made me keep fighting. You saved my life, Maria. Both of you. Maria was crying again, but this time they were tears of joy. We love you, she said simply. However that looks, whatever that means, we love you. I love you too, Alexander whispered, his eyes finally closing. Both of you. My family. Within minutes, he was asleep, his breathing deep and even. Maria sat there watching him, this man who'd changed her life in ways she never could have imagined. She thought about the scared, pregnant immigrant who'd shown up at his door 5 years ago, desperate for any chance at survival. She thought about the journey that had brought them here, to this hospital room, to this moment, to this impossible, beautiful new beginning. The future was uncertain. There would be more legal battles, more fights with the board, more people who couldn't understand or accept what was growing between them. But for now, in this quiet hospital room with the two people she loved most in the world, Maria allowed herself to hope. She allowed herself to believe in happy endings. And as dawn broke over Los Angeles, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Maria Santos laid her head down on the edge of Alexander Crane's bed, her hand still in his, and finally let herself rest.